I've titled this talk, It's Okay to Ask, and you might have seen booklets at the back that are also entitled It's Okay to Ask. And that's because what I want to talk to you about is basically it's about asking questions and getting information. So something that I very first got involved in doing research looking at supporting people with brain tumours was when I was involved in a project in Queensland where we were looking at what were the issues facing people who are affected by brain tumours. And one of the things that came out really strongly was that people said, like, we want information and we want to know, how to cope with this uncertainty. When treatments are often initiated really soon after people are diagnosed, and there's all these different people, and at the time there wasn't a lot of care coordinators, so there was no designated person to talk to. Carers in particular were saying to us that they really wanted help to prepare for the changes that were going to come ahead. People were saying, I didn't know that someone might have a seizure. I didn't know that they might end up paralysed coming out of surgery. And, this was a big issue. And people also said they wanted, technology to provide information and support. And I guess that was the starting point for where I started my research. So because of that, I decided to focus on information and, how we can get the information that we need. And we know, we need information as just part of being able to cope with our condition, to help us manage our distress, so that we can actually give proper consent to medical treatments, but, more generally participate in decision making. So we have that continuity of care, that we're not having to retell our story again and again to every different hospital or staff member. And for family members, it's about how to support someone. How do you provide care as well as actually have your own information needs met? And I did quite a bit of a review, because I did my PhD on this topic, looking at how well is information provided to people with brain tumours and their families. And I was pretty shocked at how bad the research suggested things were. So people were saying, a lot of reviews, a lot of studies were saying that there was insufficient information about the non-acute issues. There's great information about being in hospital or your actual, surgery or chemo, but not so much about what might happen in the future and how to survive with the brain tumour long term. People said that information was really not well understood. So people were not necessarily, and some of this research is getting dated now, but people are not necessarily getting full information about their diagnosis or necessarily any information about their prognosis. And there were also a lot of really sort of, misunderstandings in terms of the terminology that was used. So for example, if someone said a glioma, there wasn't necessarily, a doctor might tell someone that without any explanation of what that meant. I remember reading in one of the papers, they were talking about, a miscommunication where a surgeon said, oh, this was a really successful surgery. And the family was so delighted, going, okay, they've got it, all the tumour, it's, they're cured. And all the doctor meant, well, I didn't kill them on the table, and it was just a massive miscommunication, and, this was only, like 15 years ago that this was happening. And I thought, it's unreal, we need to do better. So overall, across studies, it was about 30 to 60% of patients and their families were saying that they had unmet information needs. And they particularly wanted information about symptoms and about, surviving into the future. So one area that I ended up deciding to go into after exploring a lot of things was looking at asking questions. And asking questions to get information you want is always, I think, very useful, because, it's tailored to how much you want to know. Not everyone wants to know everything, and often, as family members might want to know more than the actual person diagnosed. Questions are great because you can get the information specific. So we looked at producing, a booklet or a CD that had information about, brain tumours and treatments, but we were worried that that's not going to give information specific to your tumour, to your treatment, to your situation. Whereas if you sort of have an idea what to ask, then you'll be able to get that information that is specific. And to guide health professionals, I think it can be easy to forget that, the neurosurgeon or the neuro-oncologist or oncologist doesn't know what you're particularly interested in, and they don't know how much you want to know. I've spoken to a lot of medical oncologists and radiation oncologists and surgeons, and they've said, well, you know, we sort of have to be guided by the patient and their family. We need them. We're sort of trying to get to them to tell us, you know, what do you want to know? How much do you not want to? Because we don't want to overwhelm people. We don't want to take away that sense of, you know, hope and what might happen. But at the same time, if people specifically are interested in things, we want to give them whatever they need. So something that I decided to develop was a question prompt list, which is just a fancy way of saying a list of questions. And the idea is that it can assist you to say, this is what I want to know, and to get an idea of what other people in your situation have asked. And I think that can be one of those things that when you've never been in the situation, you really have no idea what's even out there, what you might need to know. And also just talking to some patients and their families, they said, you know, like if I had a list of going, this is what other people ask, I'd sort of know that it's okay to ask that, and I wouldn't feel, you know, is this something that's suitable? And it's usually in other studies that this sort of thing's been developed, they will record consultations with doctors and work out, does it help people to ask questions? And generally they found it does. It helps people to ask questions and it helps people to get the information they need. But there was none out there that had actually been developed for people with brain tumours or their families. So I undertook to develop a question prompt list, and I looked at all the existing resources that I could find worldwide. I still now actually in my garage have boxes upon boxes of every resource that I could find in a year of resources for people with brain tumours. And I did a number of interviews with patients and their families to say, well, what did you want to know? And what did you have trouble finding out? And what do you wish someone had told you earlier? And then we put together a bit of a list and we redrafted it. We took it to doctors and got their opinions on it. And we made sure it was, you know, readable and clearly understandable. And that led to what we've now developed. So this is just a bit of a diagram that was showing sort of the topics that we talked about. So things about, you know, diagnosis, prognosis, symptoms, treatment, after treatment, support and the health professional team. And I'm just going to put this up really quickly, not for you to actually read it, but just to get an idea, go back one, of all the different things that we were looking at, all the different things that people said to us, this is what we want to know, this is what we'd like to know that, you know, we might want to know about. And that led us to develop this book, which, if anyone's interested, is at the back and you can have a copy. And the idea is it just has a list of the sort of questions that you might want to ask about your brain tumour, about your family member's brain tumour. So I've just put some examples up here. Things about, you know, the actual name of the tumour, you know, are there other names for it? And I clearly remember the patient I was talking to who suggested this. He said to me, my tumour's name is Henry, but I named him, not my doctor, but he said when he was first told that he had a brain tumour, he didn't know what sort of tumour it was, and it was months and months before he actually found out that it was an anaplastic astrocytoma. And he said, it sounds so basic, but make sure that's one of your questions. You know, things about, you know, where in the brain is the tumour, you know, what that part of the brain does, you know, possibly what caused it. And I think, just as Cheryl was saying, you know, the why did I get this, what caused it, is mostly we'll just never know. But I think people still have that right, if, you know, to ask, to say, hey, is there anything I did? Is there any genetic cause? And, you know, things about how to actually explain the diagnosis to families and children, and talking to other people about this. So we then did a bit of a test, providing the question prompt list, our booklet, to people at 4 hospitals in Brisbane, and asked people, you know, did this help you to ask questions? Was this helpful? And looked at whether it assisted them during their journey. And this is a bit of a busy slide, but I just wanted to put it up. You can see from the blue and green, people were really agreeing that it helped them, that it was useful, it made it easier to ask questions, to put their concerns in words. We did have some people who said we had one person who said they found it very overwhelming to read, but most people said no, and they thought it would be useful. And although it's long, contains quite a few questions, most people are saying to us, no, that's the right link. This is a really complex condition, and, you know, we need that sort of thing. And this was just some of the sort of feedback that we got from our participants, who said, you know, one person said the brochure was great to get help, to help get an overview and prepare for what was ahead. I had difficulty with talking with doctors beforehand. Another said, I gave the brochure to my sons to read. Even my 15-year-old had no problems. It was easy to understand. And another said, the brochure didn't answer enough of what I needed to know, but I like to be able to take it and ask doctors. And I think that's the thing. We don't have all the answers, but we are trying to figure out what we can do to help you get the answers you need. So overall, we found that this was helpful, that it helped people ask questions, and it's now available online and in hard copy for anyone who's interested. What I did want to also put up was some of the tips that we discovered about asking questions when we went through the course of this research. And of course, a big one that I'd say is take in your own list of questions. Write down what it is that you want to know and take it in to your doctor or your other health professional. Write notes during the thing or record the consultation. A lot of people now have smartphones. It's really easy just to record, and there are very few health professionals who'll say, no, I don't want it recorded. And it's great to just play back afterwards. I know talking recently with a patient and his wife, and they had said that they disagreed coming out of the consultation on what the doctor was saying. And so she got out the recording and played it and proved that she was right. And I don't think that's necessarily the only reason you want to do it, but it can be useful to have that record. Ask for copies of, your test results. I think people forget that, if you want to, you can have copies of these, and most health professionals will be happy to provide them. And this can be really useful for, just for your own records if you're seeing a lot of different health professionals, or, alternately, to get a second opinion. And I think Lawrence mentioned this morning, or maybe it was Ben, that, there's such a value in getting a second opinion, and most doctors will encourage you to do it. And I know that there can be a bit of a perception that the doctor will think you don't trust them or that you're going behind their back, but that's really not the case, especially in neuro-oncology, where it is just quite a small field. And the doctors do really work together and trust each other and want to go, oh yeah, this other neurosurgeon or this other oncologist looked at this and they agree. And it's like, or they suggest this other option that maybe I hadn't thought of. So it's a really, really acceptable thing to do. Take a friend or family member with you. Take your wife or husband who can tell you afterwards that you got it wrong. My husband loves to tell me I get things wrong. And ask your doctor who else might be able to give you this useful information. So I think we've heard today about the great work that is done not just by doctors but by people like the people at Cabrini, the occupational therapists, the physiotherapists, the care coordinators. And I think these really, in my opinion, the real unsung heroes who are providing the support, and it is out there. It's just a matter of getting hooked into it. And I guess my personal thing that I wish everyone would do is, tell your doctor or other health professional if you don't understand, because people are going to think you do if you don't tell them. And I know I've been guilty of this myself with my own health, but it's, unless you say, hey, what do you mean by that? We're just not going to get that full information. And just finally, I wanted to talk about evaluating the information you receive. So I think we had a few of the speakers touch on things like, there is so much out there on the internet, and it can be mind-boggling when you see some of what is suggested. And so I always like to say to people, look at the information received. And first of all, look at, is it relevant to you? Is it, about people with your particular kind of tumour, or, I think nowadays when we've got such looking at the different methylations and everything else, it's not enough to go, hey, this study said, this was effective, or this was the life expectancy. Well, that might be the life expectancy for a whole different group of people, and that was probably 20 years ago when things were different. So, look at that. Is it biased? Is someone actually trying to sell you something? Is someone trying to make a buck out of it? And what sources does it use? Like I've got to say, I'm really skeptical when I don't see citations to people's, where did this come from? Is this just someone's opinion, or is it based on actual science? And how old are the sources? And I think it might have been Mark who said that some of the studies, they started in the 90s to recruit enough people to give us good scientific evidence, and we're only just now seeing the results. But at the same time, that does mean a lot of our studies, we're not going to see the outcomes from today's research for another 20 years. So it's you've got to just take everything with that bit of grain of salt. And does it acknowledge that there are treatment options? And I guess this is a big one, just because, you know, so many things will say you have no choice, you have to do this, this is your only option, and there are always other options out there. And does it acknowledge what's not known and that there is that uncertainty? Anywhere that says to you, you know, this will 100% cure your cancer, or this will have this definite impact, I think you can just definitely throw it out, because you know that it can't be trustworthy if they're saying that. We just don't have those sort of certainties. And finally, is it suggesting where else to go? You know, anyone that's only telling you you have to just talk to them, you know, isn't necessarily having your best interests at heart. And does it sound too good to be true, of course? So now I just wanted to talk a bit more about some directions for supportive care research. And so this is, I guess, an area where it's actually really quite exciting, because there's a lot of things being done for what is, you know, just a rare cancer. There's an increasing number of people who are doing research in this field and who really want to find what can we do to make life that little bit better, to improve quality of life or fatigue, or, you know, for people specifically with brain tumours. And I think there are some flyers going around, or perhaps at the back of the room, and this is, I guess, just some research I'm doing, and I'd really appreciate, there's some out there, anyone who'd be interested, is we're trying to look at what are the needs, the concerns, the issues for the long-term survivors of brain tumours. So, you know, whether it be high-grade or low-grade gliomas, people who have lived at least 3 years, at least 2 years with a brain tumour and their families. We'd love you to do a survey for us and let us know what you want us to focus on. I think in the past there wasn't such a cohort of long-term survivors, so there hasn't been a lot of research. But nowadays, you know, there are a lot of people who are living with a brain tumour, and so we would like to know, you know, what are your needs? What is it that you'd like? And so this is a survey that can be completed online, or if anyone's interested, I can mail you a hard copy to fill out and send back to me. The second bit of work I wanted to talk about is some work on how to improve support for carers. And I think listening to Cheryl speak, it really made me go, yes, I'm going down the right track looking at what we can do, because not a lot has been done for carers. There are great health professionals out there, but it is that middle of the night, I really need some help. You know, what do we do? And so I'm leading a team looking at developing an online, basically how-to guide and support for carers of people with brain tumours. So I'm currently developing that. I did hope to have something to give you a little bit of a sneak preview today, but we're just not quite at that point. But I will be in the coming months looking to talk to carers, either current or past carers, to get your feedback and improve this further. So if you are interested, we will try and send something around afterwards, or please let me know if you'd like to, you know, if you'd be interested in that, and I'd love to talk to anyone who would like to give feedback. And I also wanted to mention just some other work that I'm not doing, but that I am aware is happening in Australia at the moment. And so these are studies that are being done through COGNO, which is the Clinical Oncology, Cooperative Trials in Neuro-Oncology. I've got too many acronyms in my head at the moment. And we've got, this is the leading clinical trials group in Australia for brain tumours, and there's some really interesting work going on in supportive care. So there's a number of interventions that have been done in other cancer groups, starting out predominantly in breast cancer, but now we're looking at, could this be useful also in others? You know, do we need to adapt it? How can we make things useful? And some current studies that are going on are looking at exercise. So, you know, we know that it can be beneficial, but is there, you know, what particular exercise is most beneficial, and how can we make this work for people with brain tumours and also their carers? Sleep. So we know that, you know, sleep seems to be a pretty common issue affecting people with brain tumours, but we don't really know, you know, what impact that has and what do we need to do to actually improve it. Is it, you know, physical? Is it neurological? Is it psychosocial? Or probably all three. So there's some really interesting research going on in that. And the other thing, care coordination. So I think a lot of people in this room would attest to the value of care coordinators, but at a policy and governmental level, There's a bit of concern that we just don't have the evidence, not that it doesn't work, but we just don't have the proof that it works, and there is concern that maybe there will be problems with getting this funded in the future. So we are trying to do more research just to show it works so we don't lose the great care coordinators who do help. And other studies are looking at treatment-related side effects, so looking at, for example, the effects of dexamethasone and what we might do to alleviate those, specifically looking at fatigue, quality of life, sleep quality and other carer outcomes. So I don't know, I'm sure there are plenty of other issues that are important in terms of supportive care, but that's currently a bit of a snapshot of what's going on, and Di will also be able to tell you a bit more about her research. So, thank you.